Video games are a fantastic medium that allow us to sink into expansive digital worlds, roleplay protagonists whose stories we could only imagine, and meet a whole host of memorable characters along the way. Although, of course, just because they're memorable doesn't mean it's for a good reason. Probably best to head off at the pass that we do have women, children, and the elderly on this list, but we will not be using Titanic rules. Everybody's fair game, because they're voice-acted pixels, and super annoying voice-acted pixels at that. So if they fit the list, they're going on the list. All that to say, I've tried to go for some less obvious picks, but if I do miss the NPC you really need to vent about, just head down to that comment section and we'll commiserate as always. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 9 video game NPCs everyone wished they could kill. Number 9. Wraith, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. There are so many characters in the Elder Scrolls games that we want to kill, but luckily for us, most of them are totally killable. You know who isn't? Wraith. When I was thinking about NPCs for this list, genuinely I was going to sleep one night and my eyes just darted open and I said one word, Wraith. And like, if you know Wraith, you understand what that was, because that little kid sucks. Rolling around Whiterun hassling people, especially this other little kid called Lars Battleborn, Wraith is just a bully. I'm not getting into her parents being distracted or her secret crush on Lars being the cause of her abusing him, because I will give no quarter to this little snot-nosed antagonistic brat and her threatening ways. Lars literally begs her not to hit him when she sets off to shake him down, which, by the way, is her daily routine. She's rude and obnoxious even to you, but like all Skyrim children, she can't be harmed. Well, she can't be physically harmed by you, assuming you don't have a mod that lets you hurt children. You can, however, kill her parents and then she gets sent to the orphanage, but you didn't get that idea from me. Number 8. That little fairy kid blocking the exit. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. A quick Google search tells me this kid's name is Mido, which I probably could have put in the title, but I'm happy with my choice because I feel like that's how we all remembered him. You know, the kid who runs side to side and won't let you get through to the Great Deku Tree and calls you Mr. No Fairy. Yeah, that kid sucks too. Mido is the leader of the Kokiri, and I can only assume he gave himself that title and was too much of a dick for anyone to want to argue with him. He has a go at Link for not having a fairy, not having gear, not being a real man, which is pretty rich in a village full of kids, but at least we can't accuse him of targeting Link because he's a bully to pretty much everybody. Okay, so he gets apologetic in his later years, but the bar is in hell. Particularly as after you go through the tricky motions of besting the Great Deku Tree dungeon and watch the big guy pass away thanks to Ganondorf's meddling, he decides it's all Link's fault. I'm not totally convinced speedrunners didn't devise hacks to get past Mido to get better times. I think maybe it started because they just didn't want to deal with the guy. The writing was on the wall when he called himself the Great Mido, so maybe we should have seen our burgeoning hatred from the start. But either way, he's on the kill list. Number 7. Ava, Borderlands 3. It's getting a little uncool how many youths we have in a row at the top of the list here, but let's be clear, we have to focus on NPCs we want to kill but actually aren't allowed to, and most developers draw the line there. Except for Larian, because Baldur's Gate 3 says it's okay as long as the kids are goblins. There's way too much to unpack there, so let's talk about why Ava sucks. Ava is the teenager Gearbox clearly thought you'd like a lot more than you did. Potentially introduced to remind Borderlands fans that it gets way worse than Claptrap, Ava is Maya's apprentice, and while she initially appears to just be a slightly too overly enthusiastic kid, this first impression quickly gives way to a positively relentless barrage of attitude, sass, and Whedon-speak. First off, the kid never stops talking. Never stops talking. She's also being prepped to be a siren, gets our faves killed or otherwise maimed, and mouths off at everybody, including Lilith. If we're being generous, she's just a painful, ignorant kid. If we're not being generous, she is a black hole sucking all joy from every scene she's in. In a game with so many guns, it seems cruel we can't use any of them on her. Number 6. Dutch, Red Dead Redemption 2. The last time WhatCulture unleashed me on the internet to let me talk about all the NPCs I don't like, I think I gave the number 1 spot to Micah Bell, who might be the most terrible digital character ever created. But you know who could be worse? Dutch. As the head of the Vandalin gang, fellow gang member Micah may be a hateful, conniving piece of garbage, but Dutch built and enabled Micah. Not only that, Dutch makes constant pestering requests of Arthur, one of the dearest and loveliest protagonists to grace video games, and it's never enough. You run around doing his dirty work while he consistently makes horrendous choices that cost the gang campsites, money, reputation, and lives. You want to be on board with him at the beginning because he seems like a nice guy and the two have an interesting relationship, but with every one of Dutch's harebrained schemes that sounds really stupid but Arthur decides to execute anyway, and then inevitably it all falls apart, it becomes super clear he doesn't have two working brain cells to rub together. It doesn't matter how much loot you pull in for the gang or how many heists you pull off, his promises of a paradise for the gang never eventuate, even when he does have the means to pursue it. Dutch is either a selfish master manipulator or an idiot. Maybe both. Whichever way you spin it, being obligated to back his crappy calls over and over is exhausting. I've been a little cheeky with this entry and the next one, as technically in certain circumstances and times in the game these characters can be killed, but for almost the entire game they can't. So also we just hate them. They gotta go on the list. Number 5, Kai Lang for most of the game. Mass Effect 3. Kai Lang, or Captain Plot Armor, is conceptually a pretty cool bad guy. He's an assassin in a gun-riddled sci-fi universe who chooses to fight primarily with a sword. Badass. We can even sorta get over the fact that he's an evil xenophobic bounty hunter working for the Elusive Man, because that just makes us want to kill him even more. Which would be great, if we could, but we can't, because this guy has the Excalibur of plot armor. A lot of video game bosses and mini-bosses have plot armor, in that a game will let you engage with them one-on-one, only for them to get away or you to get away, so there's a rising tension in knowing you'll meet again when you're stronger. Largely this is executed well, as you generally feel underpowered in your first meeting, and you're relieved to have scraped through to live another day. Now this isn't the case with Kai Lang, as, despite his assassin credentials, the dude is absolutely takedownable. The only reason you can't flatten him when you have an encounter is that BioWare won't let you. It doesn't help that he feels totally out of place, there's very thin character motivation, even in the fleshed out book version, and he's generally just a big dud. After you really should have been able to beat him completely on Thessia, he has the gall to get up and say you're not as weak as he thought you were, but that'll get you next time. The fact that this guy is unkillable for most of the game, even if you can eventually get him, no, it's not good enough. On the list. Number 4, Gaspard, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. What do we hate? Escort missions. When do we hate them? All the time, but especially when the escortee is super slow and you're being attacked while doing said escorting, meaning you have to ensure they don't get killed off. With The Witcher 3, CD Projekt Red didn't stop at just including those two annoying parts. They also said, what if the character had narcolepsy as well? Great. Enter Gaspard's Stutter, the star of what may be the worst quest in the entire game. Said quest calls on Geralt to hunt around the Isle of Mists in search of a few dwarves whose fates are uncertain so he can get to Ciri. Spoiler alert, they're mostly dead or doomed. You gotta do this to get to Ciri, so you're pretty much trapped on this one too, it's not a side quest. There is one guy you can save and bring back to his buds called Gaspard, but he happens to suffer from narcolepsy. Quite apart from the fact that the quest is a drag that halts your progress right when things in the game are getting particularly tense, escorting Gaspard back to the hut, fending off Tangalors while he has a nap, is the opposite of fun. Like so many entries on this list, we could blame the style of the mission, the quest design, or maybe the location itself, but we're gonna go ahead and blame Gaspard. Number 3, Zach Lee, The Longest Journey. In video games, much like in life, there are personalities that tend toward good-natured, those closer to difficult to root for anti-heroes, then there are what I would generally consider to be society's dickbags. Zack from The Longest Journey is one such dickbag. Consisting of 0 redeeming qualities, your sexist human tool of a neighbor sucks as soon as you first engage with him in the first hour of the classic adventure game, and manages to somehow one-up his own suckiness as the game wears on. While being a gigantic douche is one thing, Zack manages to round out his appearances in the game, although they are blissfully limited, by selling you all out to the bad guys and even getting one of your best friends shot. So yeah, we don't love Zack. Number 2, Fisher the Breeze Builder, Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage. In Fisher's defense, it's not his fault we're having trouble with the trolley, and he's not even rude about it. But we gotta take our Ripto rage out on somebody, and if he asks us one more time if we're struggling, somebody's gonna get whacked. Spyro 2's trolley level is infamous for being the cause of many a broken controller, broken patience, and probably a handful of broken homes. The controls are agonizing, the level is way too long, there are no checkpoints, and if you slip off, you're sent right back to the beginning. Sure, you could get mad at Spyro, the boxes, the changing tracks, or the trolley itself, but nothing hits quite as good as wishing you had a harpoon between inevitable deaths so you could just move on with your life and never have got in the darn trolley to begin with. I don't know what kind of bird Fisher is, but I think I probably speak for all of us when I say I'd be happy to cook him up and find out. Was that too gory? I'm sticking with it. Number 1, Suguru Kamoshida, Persona 5 Royal. There are some truly awful NPCs on this list, and some truly awful NPCs in Persona 5 Royal alone, but Kamoshida takes the crap cake. Sure, Persona 5 Royal pits you up against a rogues gallery of douchebag adults whose hearts you have to change, and they've done all sorts of crappy things, including, but not limited to, exploiting workers, exploiting their own kids, stealing credit for students' work, and generally manipulating others. If you can dream it, or have a nightmare of it, then Persona 5 villains have done it, but none of them have done it quite so dirty as Kamoshida, and I mean that in so many versions of the word. Kamoshida might be a bit of a pushover as he's the very first boss you'll take on in Persona 5, but he's deeply effective at pulling the kids together against a common enemy and kicking off the Phantom Thieves' cause. He's a school teacher who physically abuses his volleyball team, harasses the female students, and once you dig into his uninhibited personal palace, has some particularly creepy thoughts about your pal aunt. The team also has more personal reasons to hate him as a squad than any of the other bosses, so for all these reasons and more, Kamoshida sucks. It's kind of unfortunate that the whole Persona 5 shtick is it's changing their hearts, so you basically turn them into a better person, so they fess up, realize how terrible they were, and you don't just like go murder them from inside their head. That would be really cool, and that'd be great with Kamoshida, but you know, we gotta choose the high road, I guess, but oh boy, would have been so good to just... But no.